Alright, this is Kent Kidwell again from Renewing the Renaissance in the Beginner's School. We're going through making a tiny little mold for just a very simple little piece. So this is basically a one-part mold rather than the previous two-part mold. And we're going to be casting in silicone, or actually making this mold out of silicone. And right here you see I have a platinum-based silicone two-part by weight. I got this from a company called Factor 2. They're a good company for getting silicones from. They have excellent silicone, both tin base and platinum based silicone. And so I'm going to be using this, so it's clear silicone. I don't usually use clear silicones, but it really doesn't make a difference. In the end we'll have a rubbery mold that we can use for this. And on this piece it's just a little bust. I didn't sculpt this or create it in any way. I just have it lying around. It's actually pretty damaged. But the only reason I'm doing this is just for demonstration to show how this process works. So I'm not duplicating this for anybody. I'm just screwing around with it. So along with these two items, the silicone, the two parts A and B, I have some glue sticks. I like the low temp glue sticks because they cure faster when I'm running it around trying to make things. So I prefer the low temp. And also I've got a little 1 pint cup, or 1 quart cup, excuse me. I've got a stir stick. I've got my scale here. And you need a scale that'll get down to grams when you're doing small silicone molds, because with grams you're going to have very small amounts of material, and you want to be able to make sure that you get accurate material readings on this when you're mixing with silicone, because it really does need to be accurately measured. So, and I've also got underneath right here, I've got a piece of foam core board, you know, the stuff that you'd use for, your kids use for demonstrations and things, you know, in class. And we're going to use this as not only our board for putting this little piece on, but we're also going to use it to create a dam around the piece, so when we pour the silicone on it, we'll have a nice area to work, and the material will not leak out and get everywhere. We want it to be able to stay inside of there. We're going to dam this piece up right here on the surface, and then we're going to pour the silicone inside. We'll use a brush to get in there and make sure all the details are taken care of and that there's no bubbles on the surface. We'll fill it up the remainder of the way, and then that's basically letting it cure. This particular material cures in about 10 minutes. Very fast cure, not typical of silicones, but we're using this faster cure today so that we can get this project done quickly and show you how it's done. So again, there's many kinds of silicone that you can use, and a lot of them are really good at not tearing. They'll last a long time. It really depends on how much money you want to spend when it comes to the kind of silicone you use, because some silicones can be very inexpensive but tear really easily. You only get a few castings out of it, whereas this silicone is a medium grade, I would say, platinum based, not super expensive, so it's going to be right in the middle somewhere. So again, so to start with, what I'm going to do is I got my little guy here, and I've also got a glue gun right here, my ugly old glue gun, and I'm going to chuck a new stick in there, make sure that he's ready to go. And over here I'm going to go ahead and just stick them down. So okay, so the little bust is now secured onto my board here, and so I know that this piece is about 2.5 inches tall roughly, so I want to make sure that I cut off enough wall space for it. It's going to go around it that's at least 2.5 inches tall. The top cut that I'm making doesn't have to be perfect, but I just want to make sure I use the flat. I leave a nice flat spot, because that's the part that's going to be bumping right up against the surface. So this again is just a really fast way of making a wall. And I think that this will work pretty good for this. So basically what it is you just set your board up like this. Again, that's the flat edge. Put that right against the bottom. And I see I've measured just to the right of him a little bit. So I've got about 1/2 inch to 1 inch here on the right hand side. I know it's clear. So I'm going to go ahead and just take my glue gun and run it right across the back. So basically, once I've got that done, I just come down here and I just look to where I want to make sure I have enough room on his shoulder here. So I just make a thin cut. I don't go all the way through. I just do it from the bottom up. Let's say right about here. That's all it takes. And bend it around. And I want to make another cut. So I'll just go from here straight up, bend it around, and I'll make another cut here, bend it around. Kind of the fastest way, I think, to make a decent border wall that I've found, but I'm sure there's other ways out there. But anyway, so now I just take my glue gun and I run it around those edges. Just like that. And hold it for a second so it has a chance to stick down. I'm also going to run a bead right along the inside here where this bumps right up against there. So I'll do that in a second once it's had a chance to cure up. I think we have just enough space here on the top of his head too to make sure we have enough silicone. It'll be a little close, but should still work. Okay. All right, so we have our dammed up little bust in there. So now we're going to go ahead and mix up our silicone, and initially once we've mixed it up, we're going to just brush it in and brush it on the guy to make sure that there's no details that we're missing, and to make sure we put a thin coat of silicone over the surface of him so we can see that there's no air bubbles. It's really important, because if you don't do that, and because we're not vacuuming this material, this is just for simplistic castings that you want to make. This isn't high-end reproduction. So we're just going to do a hand poured piece here and just go with that. So, and I'm weighing the cup out, because right now what I don't want is for my material to get mixed in with the weight of the cup. I want the material inside the cup to be just silicone. So I don't want to have to weigh the cup in with that. So right now it shows 0 grams. So basically I started it with on the scale, so it shows 0, but there's other ways you could do that. If I were to just walk up and turn on my scale and say it's at 0, I measured out my cup. That's 35 grams of material. I don't want that weighed into the material that I'm going to be casting in, so I'm going to just go ahead and hit the tear button, which means it drops it back down to 0, so it doesn't recognize the 35 grams of the cup. So now this material is basically mixed by weight, 1-to-1 ratio. So if I put into this cup, let's say, I'm guessing that this is going to be about 300 grams of material or so. I can't be sure about that until it's done, but if I have to, I can go back in and mix some more. So I've got part A here, and I'm going to go ahead and pour part A into this until I get about, let me see if I can do this by what I think it'll be. Let's just do 200 grams of part A, then we'll do 200 grams of part B. So if you can see the numbers going up there, I just want to be careful not to overdo it. Just put in exactly what I need. Okay, well I know I need to add 200 more grams, so I'm not recognizing any of the weight in the piece right now. I know I need to add 200 more grams of this material, of B. So I'm going to go ahead and start there. Okay, so I got 200 grams of this material in there. So I know I've got 200 of A and 200 of B. Okay, so now we have the mixed material. I'm just going to go in and quickly dab it on the areas where I want to make sure there's all the detail is captured. So I'm going to do that really, really fast. I don't want any air bubbles on the surface, so getting in the little ears and the eyes and everything, that's what I want. And so now I think that we're pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and backfill. And with this method, I'm actually going to try and create a little thin layer of material coming out, and that kind of breaks the bubbles as it pours in a little bit. It's not as good again as a vacuum, but it's what we got. Either going to be right on or a little bit short, so I'm not sure yet. Okay, so I'm just going to remove our little barrier here real fast, and I just cut this like this, just quickly. I'm not so worried about cutting the rubber now because the pattern is pretty far inside there. So it's just like this, and then I can cut right across the bottom, just above the glue line, and this way this thing will pop off quick. Push that forward a little bit to be more centralized here. Just going to tear it off. Alright. So, you see the bottom of our pattern there. Now I'm just going to take the walls off here. I've got a cube of silicone. Now this isn't exactly the most efficient way to use your silicone doing these kind of molds. But if you have high production on a small item, it actually doesn't work too bad. So I'm just kind of loosening the silicone around the model or the pattern. So, and I'm going to kind of push it a little bit so we can get them out of there. Now what I would rather not have to do is to cut it, because if I do that, then I might lose a little bit of the form of it, and I don't want it to pull apart when we're casting, so I'd much rather just try and get the pattern out of there without doing that. So now we have our pattern out, and we have our mold, and we're going to go ahead and chuck some material in there, and we'll make a little casting. Alright, so basically what I'm doing is I'm going to mix some 2-part resin in this little mixing tray here. I've got, the resin I have is a smooth cast, part A and B. It sets up in about 4 minutes. So initially what I want to do is I want to set that at 0 so I'm not weighing my tray. Okay, and I've got my part A first. I'll just use a little bit extra. Let's go with, I think 120 would do it, don't you?
Yeah, 120 probably would be alright.
Okay. I'm going to chuck my part B in there. So pro. There you go. So we were at 60. So I want to do 120. Now I just go ahead and mix that in, mix that together. Again, when you're using these kind of resins, you want to make sure you get a really nice mix. This kind of resin is a slower set. It's designed to be used with rotocast machines, so you have enough time to have the material roll around inside your mold until it cures. But I like it because it gives me time to do what I got to do and mix it and before it starts to cure.
I like the silicone.
Yeah. So we're almost got this done here. All right. So now I'm going to chuck that into my mold. Looks like we had plenty. So, and I'm going to use the back end of my brush here to go in and kind of poke around to make sure I don't have any air bubbles on the surface. Not a big deal, but just it's nice when you can go in and do that. It does clean up some of those little air bubbles. So I'll fill it up the remainder of the way. And you'll see it turn pure white in just a minute. And there we go. So we've been able to make a mold, and we've been able to cast up a little resin casting of it. It came out pretty clean. The casting itself initially wasn't all that great, so this one kind of duplicated it. So there we have it, single part silicone rubber mold and a casting. Thanks so much for working with us through this process, and we hope you come back and continue viewing more of our videos at Renewing the Renaissance and the Beginner School, and we certainly hope that they're beneficial for you. Thanks again. Bye.